People think danger looks loud. Tonight it wore a black suit and ordered bourbon neat. The tray in my hands felt heavier than it should have, silver biting into my fingers as I crossed the marble floor for the third time in 5 minutes, trying not to trip, trying not to spill, trying not to get fired on my first night. 24, brand new uniform, and already sweating through it under lights that made everything look more expensive than it really was. The Grande Verona wasn't a place for rookies. And yet there I was, assigned to the one section everyone else avoided, the velvet-roped corner where voices dropped and eyes didn't linger. I didn't know his name yet, not officially, but I felt him the second he walked in, like the air shifted a few degrees colder. Conversations didn't stop. Not exactly. They just softened, like the room had agreed on a quieter version of itself. He moved without rushing, tall, composed, dark suit tailored within an inch of perfection. The kind of presence that didn't ask for attention and got it anyway. I kept my eyes on the tray. Because that's what you do when you're new. You don't stare at men like that. You don't get curious. You don't make mistakes. Table 12. Marco hissed as he brushed past me. Not looking, just ordering. Don't mess this up, Claire. And I nodded like I had any idea what this even was. I approached with careful steps, counting them in my head. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. Set the glass down. Don't shake. He didn't look at the menu. Didn't look at me either. Not at first. Just glanced once. Quick. Precise, like he'd already decided what I was worth in under a second. It should have annoyed me, but mostly it steadied me. Being invisible felt safer. I turned to leave when I noticed him, not the man in the suit, the other one, the one who didn't belong. He was too still, too large, easily pushing 7 feet if he stood straight, shoulders cutting a silhouette that didn't match the elegance of the room. He wasn't eating, wasn't drinking, just watching, and not in the casual way customers watch. Waitstaff, but in angles, in timing, like he was measuring distance. I slowed without meaning to, my pulse ticking. Faster, tray trembling just enough for me to tighten my grip. Nobody else seemed to notice, or maybe they noticed and chose not to. I couldn't tell. The music continued. Soft piano threading through conversations about stocks and vacations and things that had nothing to do with the quiet tension building 3 tables away. I told myself I was imagining it, that this was just nerves, first night jitters, the kind that make every shadow look sharper. But then he shifted, just slightly, weight, rolling forward onto the balls of his feet, and something in my chest went tight. I'd seen that before, not here, not in places with chandeliers and imported wine, but somewhere else, a memory I didn't like revisiting, a lesson learned the hard way about how fast things could change. I set the last glass down, turned, and for a split second my eyes met the man in the black suit. Adrian, I would later learn. And there was something in that look, something alert, like he felt it too, like the room had tilted and only a few of us noticed. I should have walked away, should have gone back to the kitchen, should have stayed exactly what I was. A waitress on her first shift trying to survive the night. But my feet didn't move, because somewhere between the clink of crystal and the hush of expensive voices, I realized this wasn't just another table, and whatever was about to happen wasn't going to ask if I was ready. Time did not slow down the way people always say it does. It sharpened, every detail cutting clearer than before. The faint hum of the piano, the soft clink of ice against glass, the quiet inhale I did not realize I was holding. The man by the pillar moved, not fast, not yet, but with intent, and that was enough to make my pulse spike. I should have looked away, should have gone back to the kitchen like every instinct trained into me since clocking in an hour ago, but something older, something deeper, rooted me in place. I had seen that shift before, that subtle lean forward, that calculation behind stillness, the kind that comes right before everything changes. My grip tightened around the tray, the cool metal pressing into my palm, grounding me. Across the room, Adrian did not move, not visibly, but his eyes had changed, focus narrowing, attention locking onto the same point mine had. And that was when I understood this was not just nerves, not just imagination. This was real. The distance between them could not have been more than 20 feet, a straight line if you ignored the tables, the guests, the illusion of safety wrapped in soft lighting and polished floors. The large man took one step, then another, and nobody stopped him because nobody saw him the way we did. I felt my heart slam harder, a rhythm too loud in my chest. And for a second I hated it. Hated that my body remembered things I wished it would forget. Angles, timing, proximity, all of it surfacing without permission. I shifted my weight, barely noticeable, adjusting my stance the way I had been taught years ago for reasons that had nothing to do with waitressing and everything to do with surviving situations you did not get to choose. The tray in my hands was no longer just a tray. It was balance, reach, something solid in a moment that felt like it was slipping. Another step from him, closer now, close enough that if he lunged there would be no warning left, no space for hesitation. I glanced at Adrian again, just a flicker, and for a fraction of a second our eyes met, not as server and customer, but as two people aware of the same invisible line about to be crossed. I do not know what he saw in my expression, fear maybe, or something steadier, but he did not look away. This time, the room continued around us, laughter rising at a table near the bar, a server rushing past with a bottle of wine, Marco arguing quietly with the hostess, all of it normal, all of it wrong. The large man shifted again, faster now, and something inside me clicked into place, not a decision, not really, more like the absence of one, because by the time you realize you have a choice, sometimes it is already too late. I stepped forward before I could think better of it, just one step, closing a distance that should have felt impossible, my breath shallow, my hands steady in a way that surprised me. The tray tilted slightly as I moved, catching the light, a flash of silver that drew the wrong kind of attention for exactly the right reason. Everything narrowed to a single line, him, Adrian, and the space between them, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that whatever happened in the next few seconds would not stay inside this room, would not stay small, and would not leave me unchanged. It happened in less than 3 seconds, but I remember every fraction of it like it stretched across minutes. The large man closed the final gap with a sudden shift in speed that broke the illusion of normalcy, chairs scraping faintly as a few guests sensed something wrong without understanding it. And in that exact moment my body moved before my thoughts could catch up. The tray in my hands rose, not as an attack, not as anything dramatic, just enough to interrupt the line he had chosen, enough to force his movement off balance, and that was all it took. His momentum changed, redirected just slightly, but in a situation measured in inches and seconds, slightly was everything. I stepped into that opening without thinking, the way you do when hesitation costs more than action, my shoulder turning, my weight shifting, guiding rather than fighting, and suddenly he was not where he intended to be. The edge of the table caught his path, the clean geometry of the room breaking under a movement it had not been designed to hold, and a sharp burst of sound cut through the music as crystal rattled and something tipped over. People froze then, really froze this time. Conversations collapsing into silence as the moment revealed itself for what it was. I stumbled back a step, breath catching, the tray slipping from my grip and clattering to the marble floor with a sound that seemed far too loud. For a second nobody moved. Not the guests, not the staff, not even me. I just stood there, staring at what I had done, or maybe what I had interrupted, my hands suddenly empty, my pulse racing so hard it made my vision flicker at the edges. Then everything rushed back at once. Security appeared like they had been waiting just out of sight, voices low but urgent, guiding people away, containing the situation without ever naming it. Marco's voice cut through somewhere behind me, sharp and panicked, but I could not process the words. My attention locked on Adrian. He had not stepped back, had not flinched, he simply stood there, exactly where he had been, as if the entire room had shifted around him instead. His gaze lifted slowly from the floor to me, and that was when it hit me, the real weight of what just happened, not the movement, not the interruption, but the fact that he was looking at me like I was no longer invisible. His eyes were not angry, not even surprised. They were calculating, focused, like he was placing me somewhere in a system I did not understand. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of every mistake I had made tonight, every step out of line, every second I had stayed when I should have walked away. I opened my mouth to apologize, to explain, to say anything that would make this normal again, but no words came out, because deep down I knew this was not something that could be explained away with a simple apology. One of the security men approached Adrian, speaking quietly, but Adrian did not look away from me, not even for a second. The room around us began to move again, slowly, carefully, like people were pretending nothing had happened, like the night could still be saved, but I felt it, the shift, the invisible line I had crossed without permission, and when Adrian finally spoke, his voice low and controlled, directed only at me, it was not a question, not really, it was an acknowledgement. You saw it before anyone else, he said, and in that moment I understood something I could not take back. I had not just interrupted a stranger, I had stepped into his world, and people like him did not forget the ones who did that. The silence did not break all at once, it fractured slowly, like glass settling after impact, voices returning in cautious layers, footsteps resuming with forced normalcy, but nothing felt the same anymore. I became aware of my hands first, still slightly raised, fingers trembling just enough to betray what I refused to show on my face. I lowered them carefully, like sudden movement might pull attention back to me, like I could somehow undo the last few seconds. By becoming small again, Claire, Marco's voice snapped from behind me, sharp, controlled panic barely held together. What did you just do? But I did not turn, because I could not, because Adrian was still looking at me, and that look held me in place stronger than any command. One of his men stepped closer, speaking low, controlled, the kind of voice that carried authority without needing volume. But Adrian lifted a single hand, and the man stopped immediately, mid-sentence, like the rest of the room had learned to do. That gesture told me more than anything else could, not loud, not dramatic, just absolute control. Adrian took one step toward me, then another, closing the distance I had tried so hard to keep earlier, and now there was nowhere to step back without making it obvious. Up close, he felt even more dangerous, not because of anything he did, but because of everything he did not need to do. His presence filled the space, quiet and complete. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice low, steady, like the chaos around us had never happened, like he was asking something simple, ordinary. I blinked, caught off guard by the question, by the fact that he was asking it at all. "No." I managed, my voice softer than I intended. "I am fine." And even as I said it, I realized how strange that sounded, how nothing about this was fine. His eyes flicked briefly to my hands, to the faint redness where the tray had pressed too hard, then back to my face, assessing, confirming. And for a moment I felt like I was being read, not judged, not dismissed, just understood in a way that made my chest tighten. "You moved before my security did," he said quietly, not as praise, not as accusation, just fact. I did not know how to answer that, because there was no answer that made sense, not here, not to someone like him. I thought. I started, then stopped, because explaining instinct sounded ridiculous out loud. His gaze did not waver, and something in it shifted, not softer, not exactly, but more focused, more certain. Around us, the staff worked quickly, resetting tables, guiding guests, pretending the night could still continue, but I felt it, the way the space around Adrian and me had separated from everything else, like we were standing in a different version of the room. Marco approached again, slower this time, cautious, his usual authority replaced with something uncertain, something almost deferential as he addressed Adrian instead of me, apologizing, explaining, trying to smooth over something he clearly did not understand. Adrian did not acknowledge him at first, his attention still fixed on me, and when he finally spoke, it was not to Marco, it was still to me. "You should not be here when this kind of thing happens," he said, calm, deliberate, like he was stating a rule that had already been broken. I felt a flicker of defiance rise before I could stop it, small but real, because I had been here, I had acted, and now he was telling me I should not have been. "I work here," I replied, the words steadier than I felt, and for the first time, something almost like interest crossed his expression, subtle but undeniable, not amusement, not approval, just recognition. "Not anymore," he said, and the simplicity of it landed harder than anything else that night, because it was not a suggestion, not a threat, just a decision, and I realized with a cold clarity that stepping into his world had not been a moment, it had been a point of no return. For a second I thought I had misheard him, like the words had not quite landed the way he intended, like there was still room to step back into the version of my life where I clocked out, took the bus home, and forgot this night ever happened. But Adrian did not repeat himself, did not clarify, because men like him did not need to. They said something once, and the world adjusted around it. I cannot just leave, I said, the words coming out faster now, steadier, because if I let the silence stretch too long, it would swallow me whole. I just started this job. I need it. And even as I said it, I heard how small it sounded compared to everything else that had just happened. His gaze did not harden, but it did not soften either. It simply remained, fixed, like he was measuring something I could not see. You needed it an hour ago, he replied, calm, precise, before you stepped between two things that do not stop once they start. And the way he said it made my chest tighten, because there was no drama in his tone, no exaggeration, just certainty. Behind him, his men moved quietly, efficient, guiding the situation back into something controlled, but their attention flickered toward me more than once now, not dismissive, not casual, but aware. I felt it. The shift, the way I was no longer background, no longer part of the furniture of this place. Marco tried again, stepping closer, his voice lower this time, almost careful as he addressed Adrian, offering apologies, explanations, trying to keep his business intact, but Adrian did not engage with him. Not really. His focus stayed on me, and that was somehow worse. I did not ask for this, I said, quieter now, because it was the only truth I had left to hold on to. I was just doing my job, and that, finally, seemed to reach him in a way nothing else had. Not sympathy, not exactly, but understanding layered with something more complicated. Exactly, he said, and there was a faint shift in his tone, something almost reflective. And that is why you are still standing here. The words settled heavier than anything else had, because I knew what he meant without him needing to explain it. I swallowed, my throat dry, my mind racing through possibilities that did not lead anywhere safe. So what happens now? I asked, before I could stop myself, because not knowing felt worse than anything he could say. For the first time since this started, Adrian glanced away, just briefly, toward one of his men, a silent exchange passing between them that I could not interpret but felt all the same. When his attention returned to me, it was sharper, more resolved. Now, he said slowly, you do not go home the way you planned. And the simplicity of it made my stomach drop. I have a life. I pushed back, the words coming out with more force than I intended, because something inside me refused to disappear into his decisions without a fight. I have responsibilities. I cannot just... I stopped, because the sentence had nowhere to go that made sense in this moment. Adrian studied me for a long second, and then something changed again, subtle but real, like a decision settling into place. You think I am taking something from you, he said quietly, but I am removing you from something that already noticed you. And that was the first time fear cut through the adrenaline in a way that stayed, because deep down, I knew he was right. The man I had stopped had not looked surprised when things went wrong. He had looked at me like he would remember, and people like that did not forget. Adrian took a step back then, not retreating, just creating space, but the distance did not make anything feel safer. Get your things, he said, not as an order shouted across a room, but as something far more absolute. You are leaving with me. And as the words settled into the air between us, I realized this was not about choice anymore. It was about survival, and somehow, impossibly, the safest place in the room had just become standing next to the most dangerous man in it. The words did not echo, they settled, heavy and final. And for a moment I just stood there, staring at him like if I did not move, none of this would become real. Get your things, you are leaving with me. It sounded simple, almost reasonable in the way he said it. But nothing about this was simple. I cannot just walk out, I said, quieter now, not arguing, just trying to hold on to something that still made sense. People will notice. And even as I said it, I realized how small that concern sounded compared to everything else. Adrian's gaze shifted briefly past me, scanning the room in a way that took in everything without seeming to linger on anything. And when his eyes returned to mine, there was a certainty there that made my stomach tighten. They already have, he said, and I felt it then. The subtle weight of attention from places I could not pinpoint, not obvious, not direct, but present. The kind you only notice once you know to look for it. I turned slightly, just enough, to glance around without making it obvious, and the restaurant looked normal again. Almost perfectly so, guests back in their conversations, staff moving with practiced efficiency. But it felt staged now, like a performance continuing after something had gone off script. Claire, Marco's voice came again, softer this time, uncertain, like he did not know which side of this situation he was supposed to stand on. Go to the back, take a minute. But he was not really talking to me, not fully. His eyes flicked toward Adrian more than once, waiting for a reaction that never came. I hesitated, caught between two versions of my life, the one I understood and the one unfolding in front of me. And for a second, I almost chose the familiar one. Almost turned toward the kitchen like none of this had happened. Adrian took one step closer, not blocking me, not touching me, just existing in a way that made the choice clear without forcing it. If you walk away right now, he said quietly, you will still leave with me, just later, and under worse circumstances. And something in his tone made my chest go tight again, not fear exactly, but the recognition of truth I did not want to accept. I exhaled slowly, my hands curling slightly at my sides as I tried to steady myself. I need my bag, I said finally, the words feeling like a line I was crossing with full awareness this time. Adrian gave a small nod, not approval, not permission, just acknowledgement, and one of his men stepped forward immediately, not to touch me, not to guide me, just to walk beside me as I turned toward the hallway leading to the staff area. The distance felt longer than it had before, every step heavier, every sound sharper, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of voices, the echo of my own footsteps against polished floors. I pushed through the back door into the staff corridor, the sudden quiet hitting me like a wall, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of detergent and stale coffee replacing the polished scent of the dining room. My locker was halfway down, second row, top left, and my hands shook just enough that it took me 2 tries to get it open. I grabbed my bag, shoving my phone and keys inside without checking, my mind racing faster than my movements. This was insane, completely insane. I had come here to work a shift, to earn tips, to make rent, and now I was packing up like I was leaving a life I had barely started. I paused for half a second, staring at my reflection in the dull metal of the locker door, eyes wide, breathing uneven, and for a moment I did not recognize the girl looking back at me. Then the door behind me opened quietly, and I did not need to turn to know who it was. We do not have much time. Adrian's voice came from just behind me, calm, steady, like the world outside this hallway was already moving faster than I could see. I closed the locker with a soft click, my grip tightening around my bag as I turned to face him. And in that moment, with nothing left between us but a narrow corridor and a decision already made, I understood that whatever came next was not something I could prepare for, only something I had to step into. The space between us felt smaller than it should have, like the hallway had narrowed without warning, like the world outside had already started moving, and we were the only ones standing still. I adjusted my grip on my bag, the strap pressing into my shoulder, grounding me in a way nothing else did right now. Where are we going? I asked, because I needed something concrete, something I could hold on to that sounded like a plan instead of a situation spiraling beyond anything I understood. Adrian studied me for a second, not surprised by the question, not dismissing it either, just weighing how much to say. Somewhere quieter, he replied, calm as ever, like we were discussing a change of tables instead of leaving an entire life behind. Somewhere you can breathe without everyone watching. I let out a small breath I did not realize I had been holding, but it did not ease the tension in my chest. And after that, I pressed, because quiet did not solve anything, it only delayed it. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable, and for a moment I thought he would not answer, that this was where the limits of my questions ended. After that, he said slowly, we figure out who decided you mattered tonight. And the way he said it made my pulse spike again, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet confirmation that this was bigger than a single moment. I swallowed, my mind racing through possibilities I did not want to name, images of the man from earlier, the way he had looked at me, not surprised, not confused, just aware. I did not do anything, I said, softer now, because it felt important to say it out loud, even if it did not change anything. I just reacted. Adrian's expression shifted, just slightly, something almost like understanding passing through it before it settled back into control. Exactly, he said. And that is what makes you noticeable. The words landed harder than I expected because they stripped away any illusion that I could fade back into the background, that I could return to being unseen. He stepped past me then, not brushing against me, not crowding me, just moving toward the door at the end of the corridor with a certainty that pulled everything forward with it. I followed without thinking, my steps quick to match his, the sound of our movement echoing softly against the walls. The door opened into a dimly lit service exit, the hum of the city slipping in through the narrow gap. Cooler air brushing against my face like a wake-up call I could not ignore. Outside, the world looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Cars passing, distant voices, the glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. But it felt different now, sharper, like I was seeing it from a place I had not stood before. A dark car waited at the curb, engine running, the kind of vehicle you noticed without knowing why. Clean lines, tinted windows, presence without noise. One of Adrian's men opened the rear door without a word, stepping back just enough to give space without stepping away entirely. I hesitated for half a second, my gaze flicking from the car to Adrian, to the street beyond, to the life I could still technically walk back into if I chose to ignore everything I had just learned. You still have a choice, I said quietly, not sure if I was asking or telling, not sure if I believed it. Adrian looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time there was something in his expression that felt almost human, not softer, not weaker, but real in a way that cut through everything else. You always have a choice, he said, but not all choices leave you with the same future. The city noise filled the silence that followed, distant and indifferent, and I stood there for one last second, feeling the weight of everything pressing in at once, before I stepped forward and got into the car, because deep down I already knew that whatever future I had just left behind was no longer mine to return to. The door closed with a quiet, solid click that felt louder than anything else that night, sealing off the outside world like a line drawn too late to cross back. The interior of the car was dim, cool, the faint scent of leather, and something clean replacing the noise and pressure of the restaurant in an instant. I sat still for a second, hands resting on my bag, fingers curled tighter than I realized. As the engine's low hum settled into a steady rhythm beneath us, Adrian slid in beside me. Without urgency, the door shutting behind him with the same controlled finality, and just like that, the car pulled away from the curb, smooth, deliberate, like this had been planned long before I stepped into it. I turned my head slightly, watching the restaurant fade through the tinted glass, its lights blurring into streaks as we merged into traffic, and for a moment it felt unreal, like I had imagined the entire thing and this was just a ride home, just another night ending the way it always did. But the weight in my chest said otherwise. You are very calm, I said before I could stop myself, the observation slipping out because it felt like the only thing I could hold on to, the only constant in a situation that made no sense. Adrian did not look at me immediately, his gaze fixed ahead, posture relaxed in a way that did not match anything about the night we just left behind. Calm is useful, he replied after a second, voice low, steady. Panic does not change outcomes. I let out a small breath, something between a laugh and disbelief, because that sounded simple, almost detached, and yet nothing about this felt simple. I stopped, the sentence catching in my throat because I did not know how to finish it without stepping into something I was not ready to name. He glanced at me then, just briefly, enough to acknowledge what I was trying to say, without forcing me to say it. I did not, he said quietly, and there was no arrogance in it, just fact, just a line drawn between what happened and what could have. Silence settled again, heavier this time, filled with everything neither of us said. I shifted slightly in my seat, the city lights sliding across the window casting fleeting reflections that made everything feel distant, disconnected. Why me? I asked after a moment, softer now, because that question had been sitting under everything else since the hallway, since the second he said I was leaving with him. Adrian leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable in the low light, but his attention shifted fully to me this time, focused in a way that made the rest of the car feel smaller. Because you changed something that was already in motion, he said, slow, deliberate, like each word mattered. And people do not like it when their plans change. I swallowed. the implication settling in deeper than I wanted it to, because it confirmed what I had been trying not to think about. So now I am part of it, I said, not a question, just stating what had already become obvious. Adrian held my gaze for a second longer before looking away again, out toward the passing city. You are already inside it, he replied, and the difference between those two statements hit harder than anything else he had said. I leaned back against the seat, the weight of that realization pressing down in a way that made it hard to breathe normally, because stepping into the car had not been the moment everything changed. It had already changed before that, before the hallway, before the tray slipped from my hands. I closed my eyes for a second, just long enough to steady myself, to hold on to something that still felt like me in the middle of all this. When I opened them again, Adrian was watching me, not intensely, not aggressively, just there, present, like he was waiting to see how I would adjust to a reality I never asked for. And for the first time since this started, I understood something clearly. He was not just protecting me. He was observing me, measuring what I would do next, because whatever came after this was not just about survival. It was about who I would become once there was no going back. The city kept moving like nothing had changed, headlights sliding past in steady lines, traffic lights shifting from red to green and back again, people crossing streets with their heads down, living lives that had nothing to do with mine anymore. I watched it all through the tinted window, the glass turning everything into something distant, something I could see but not touch. It struck me then, not all at once, but in a slow, sinking way, that I had not just left a place, I had stepped out of a version of myself that would never exist again. Where are we going? I asked, not because I expected a clear answer, but because I needed something to anchor me, something that sounded like direction instead of drift. Adrian did not respond immediately, his gaze fixed ahead, posture unchanged, like the road itself was something he already understood before it unfolded. Somewhere secure, he said after a moment. The word precise, chosen carefully, and I noticed he did not say safe, which somehow made it more honest. I nodded slightly. Even though the distinction settled heavier than I wanted it to, silence returned, but it felt different now, less suffocating, more defined, like I was starting to understand the shape of it. I shifted in my seat, adjusting my grip on my bag, feeling the small familiar weight of my phone inside it, the only piece of my old life that had made it into this one. You said they noticed me, I said quietly, my voice steadier now, not because I was less afraid, but because fear had settled into something I could carry instead of something that overwhelmed me. How long do I stay like this, under watch, under whatever this is? Adrian turned his head slightly, just enough that I could see the outline of his expression in the low light, still controlled, still unreadable. But there was something else there now, something closer to acknowledgement. Until they decide you are not worth the effort, he replied, calm, direct. Or until I make sure they do not get the chance to decide at all. The way he said it did not sound like a promise meant to comfort. It sounded like a strategy already in motion. I exhaled slowly, letting that settle, because there was no version of this where I could pretend it would resolve itself quietly. And what if I do not want to be part of that strategy? I asked, not challenging, just honest, because that question mattered more than anything else. Adrian looked at me fully then, his attention sharp, focused in a way that made everything else fade for a second. Then you learn how to step out of it, he said, but you do not do that by pretending it does not exist. The words landed with a clarity that cut through the last pieces of denial I had been holding on to, because deep down I already knew that ignoring this would not make it disappear. The car slowed slightly as we turned off the main road, the noise of the city dimming just enough to notice, the lights less crowded, the buildings more spaced out, like we were crossing into a different layer of the same place. I glanced out the window again, taking in details I would not have noticed before. Exits, shadows, reflections, my mind adjusting without asking permission. You are not as lost as you think, Adrian said suddenly, and I turned back to him, surprised by the timing, by the fact that he had been watching me closely enough to read something I had not said. You saw what others missed, you acted when others froze. That does not disappear just because the setting changed. I held his gaze for a second, unsure how to respond, because part of me wanted to reject that, to hold on to the idea that I was still just a waitress who got caught in the wrong moment. But another part of me, quieter, more honest, recognized the truth in it. I had seen something, I had acted, and that could not be undone. The car came to a smooth stop, the engine idling softly as the driver waited, and Adrian reached for the door handle without hesitation. Like this was just another step in a path he had already mapped out. I tightened my grip on my bag, my breath steadying as I prepared to follow, because stepping out of the car felt like crossing another line, one that would take me even further from anything familiar. "Claire," Adrian said before opening the door, his voice lower now, more focused than before, and I looked at him, meeting his gaze without looking away this time. "What happened tonight?" he continued. "It was not luck, and it was not a mistake." He paused for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the weight of the moment to settle. "It was a choice, even if you did not realize it at the time." The words stayed with me as he stepped out, the night air slipping in through the open door, cool and sharp against my skin, and, for the first time since this began, I understood the real shift, not just that I had stepped into his world, but that I had already started changing inside it. And whatever came next would not be about going back. It would be about deciding who I would become now that I knew what I was capable of.